Resuming debate?
Resuming debate.
Resuming debate.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the Resuming Debate podcast. Today we're doing another in-person recording here in my Parliament Hill office and showcasing a great new Member of Parliament. I'm very pleased to be able to introduce you to new Member of Parliament from Newmarket Aurora, my friend Sandra Cobena. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Carney.
So we're going to talk a little bit about your background, your first impressions being here, and in particular we're going to talk about the budget. You're someone who comes with, I think, unique experience coming from the corporate world, the banking world, bringing a fresh set of eyes to the decisions the government's making around finances, and bringing a lot of private sector expertise. So I want maybe just to start off, if you could share a bit with our audience, kind of about your career background, some of the things you did before getting into politics that shaped your knowledge coming into this work you're doing now.
Yeah, sure. So my background professionally has always been in finance, in the commercial lending space. So that means that I was advising and helping companies that are in that what we call mid-market space, so small to medium-sized enterprises that are trying to grow. So it's those small companies that want to become medium and the medium ones that want to become large. And advising them in every respect of finance, from lending to cash management and things like that. So I did that for about close to 15 years. And my studies, of course, were also in finance. With my master's, I went to Western in London, Ontario. And funny enough, I did my master's at the London School of Economics in London, England. So, my
so always
passion,
cities named London, I guess.
I suppose
yeah.
that's how it worked out.
Yeah.
But it's I love finance. I've always loved it. I come from a family of entrepreneurs as well, so I have also seen the personal sacrifices that are required to start a business, how difficult it is, and of course now, given the economic conditions, is even harder.
Yeah. So just picking up on your comment about the economic conditions. So you said 15 years of doing this work. So last 5 years of Stephen Harper, and then through the Trudeau years. Maybe tell our audience a bit about kind of what the timeline was around how political changes were impacting. And at some point along the way, you must have made the decision to go into politics yourself, maybe reflecting some of those circumstances. So.
Yeah, I mean, I personally saw a very, very different economic landscape, specifically for entrepreneurs and for businesses in Canada. One of the biggest things I can tell you is when Prime Minister Harper was in government, I had the wonderful opportunity to travel with him in he did a lot of trade and development missions. And I remember at the time there was this craze around being Canadian, and the Canadian brand was really at its peak, I think. And so naturally, for businesses that are exploring markets outside of Canada and the US, then it is much easier. Unfortunately, fast forward into even when I did my master's in London, the Canadian brand had taken a big hit.
Mm-hmm. And that was at what point in the...
It would have been 4 years after Trudeau.
Okay.
So even in that 4-year period, there was a deterioration. Mm-hmm. Canada was not seen as a country that was easy to do business with, not necessarily business friendly. And I heard this directly from the entrepreneurs themselves, even in saying that even if we are able to compete on the quality of the product, on the pricing of the product, and you think that we have a bit of an advantage because of the value of the Canadian dollar, if we were, all things considered, if we were all the same, we would lose that contract and that opportunity because of the brand that Canada had around the world, and that being that we're very difficult to do business with. So over-regulation and just delays and everything else. So there was a shift there. I had seen it. I was seeing it and hearing it from the business owners themselves at work and just within my circles. So over time, I started to see many differences in Canada, and obviously in the business landscape, but also just in other areas that sort of contributed to my decision to deciding to run. I did not have a childhood dream to go into politics, I'll be honest. Coming from South America, where governments can be very corrupt, very unstable, and just not an environment that's welcoming to women or to youth, it wasn't a place that I aspired to be. And so, but coming to Canada and having that opportunity to actually travel with the Prime Minister and seeing that Canada is different, there is a place to make a difference. Youth can have a voice, can play a part in big decisions. Over time, I started to feel convicted to run, and so ultimately decided to test it out and ended up running.
Yeah, neat. And now you're on the Finance Committee, which is like an incredible platform to be able to apply your finance knowledge. And it's pretty rare that a new member of Parliament would have the opportunity to serve on that important committee. I want to just pick up on a comment you made about kind of the brand, how Canada was perceived and how we are perceived now. You're talking about these trade missions that Stephen Harper used to do, which was leveraging existing brand strength, right? Now there's a lot of talk about Mark Carney's travels. He's going to different locations, and there's a lot of talk about diversification. But do you see changes that are affecting that underlying brand strength? That's because it's not I assume it's not the trips themselves that produce these results. It's more if you're perceived as a good place to do business, then you can make connections through this travel. But if you're not perceived that way, it matters less.
100%. The fundamental issues are not being addressed, I can tell you that. And it does not matter how many trips our government takes. At the end of the day, investors will look at the opportunities and whether they are actually going to be able to have a return, and how difficult it's going to be for them for their dollars to be productive. And so there are investors right now, and even before the Prime Minister started traveling, that investors that wanted to invest in Canada, they're exploring opportunities right now, and they are deciding, unfortunately, we cannot because of the delays in the overregulation. It is, there are decisions being made right now, irrespective of the travels. And that is why we have been vocal around, we need to address those. We need to unleash the business community. We need to unleash industry to open those opportunities. We know that this was a challenge leading up to the last election, leading up to the trade issues that we have with the U.S. And the Prime Minister himself recognized that, and he said, you know what, our economy was weak before this happened, and of course this adds a layer of complication and deterioration, of course, but the issues were there, and they will continue to be there if they're not addressed. So there is a signaling, there could be a signaling that yes, Canada is open for business, but ultimately, if you have an investor that is testing opportunities in Canada and they're not getting their permits, or they have this complicated, convoluted process for approvals, and convoluted process for taxes, right, and over-taxation, and there is another country, and the one that typically compares to us is the one south of the border, that is much easier, much faster, we're going to lose the business, irrespective of whether there's the strips made deals made high level or not.
Yeah, and you've shared some anecdotes with me specifically about that for businesses in your riding. Anything you want to share about specific conversations you've had with businesses that are looking at Canada, looking at other jurisdictions, and deciding to invest elsewhere? Yeah,
I mean, the one that always comes to mind is the one that where I've got an entrepreneur who had a contract in hand for orders. He needed to, for an order, he needed to put a manufacturing line in place. He is Canadian, of course. First place, he looks in Canada, applies, he's waiting for this permit to expand his business. He's not even a new entrepreneur. He has been doing business for, I think he mentioned over 30 years. And after being frustrated to follow up and not get an answer, he decided to fly to Ohio. And he said to me, you wouldn't believe this, but I arrived in Ohio and I was able to meet with all 3 levels of government, got my approvals in place, got my funding in place, and then walked across the street and got my financing in place. And then I flew home and I thought to myself, well, how can Canada compete? Those are the fundamentals that I refer to that are not being addressed right now. And he said, unfortunately, it breaks my heart, but I'm at the risk of losing this contract. I have to invest in the U.S. And if you think about it, that particularly with manufacturing, it's a capital-intensive industry. And so you've got millions of dollars that are going to be invested. They're never coming back.
Yeah.
That money, that investment is never coming back. They're going to be established there, and it's money into the economy, jobs created for families, and obviously the economic impacts long term that Canada has missed out on and will continue to miss out on if these issues are not addressed.
Yeah. So in the context of that dynamic comes Budget 2025, which has a lot of good things to say about itself, as government documents often do. You've quickly noticed, I'm sure. It's kind of this interesting rhetorical dynamic from the government of clearly being the continuation of a Liberal government with most of the same people, but trying to profess its newness and at some point sort of identifying real problems that have existed over the last 10 years. But there's a lot of other changes in this budget. So give us your response to the budget 2025. Is it transformational? Is it generational? Is it what's it going to do for the problems you identified?
So when I take a step back and I look at budget 2025, as you know, there was so much anticipation for the budget. Why? Because we didn't have a budget for a year and a half. Yep. The government kept delaying it, which in the private sector, if a CEO is delaying a budget like that for over a year and a half, they would get fired. But nonetheless, we finally received the budget. It was released, it was tabled. And so the first reaction was a bit of disappointment, and I tell you why. Before you even dive into the numbers, if you go back to the election, there were a lot of people who thought that in Mark Carney, you may have a prime minister who will finally take care of the country's finances. Somebody who understands the numbers and who would care about the numbers. When you look at the budget and you look at $78 billion, close to $80 billion in deficit, which is double the Trudeau budget, which was which was $42 billion. Well, that in itself is disappointing, right? We thought that at the time Trudeau was reckless with our finances, and now we see doubling of that. That was a big hit. It was a very difficult pill to swallow. And of course, with that, we see an incredible amount of spending, like an additional $141 billion, in addition to what Trudeau had already been spending, which was already high. Yeah. Our debt now increases to $1.35 trillion. So you don't see any restraint in this government from somebody who was supposed to take care of our country's finances. I looked at it and I flipped through it and I'm thinking, I think people are just ignoring the numbers, right? Like how can you take on so much spending, so much debt, knowing the long-term consequences of this, and be comfortable with it? Somebody who's supposed to understand and care for the numbers. I don't see it in the budget. That was alarming to me. And of course, we had some warnings before the budget was tabled from the Parliamentary Budget Officer, where he said this is unsustainable. this is shocking, this is stupefying. At the time, of course, we didn't have the luxury of having the numbers. Now we have them. Of course, he's going to be using that language because it is completely crazy, the numbers. Yeah. It's really hard to even understand what that means to an everyday person and what it means to us, because their numbers are so astronomical. So every hour that goes by, so every tick of the clock, you have $10 million more in debt because of this government, and they're pushing on with it. What you'll notice too is two things. One, the largest procurement in Canadian history, the submarines, $100 billion of spending was not included in the budget. So the numbers that you see there are unreliable.
Wow.
Okay, because that is not included. And we've known that we've needed to replace that fleet of submarines, and that should have been included in some form. Second, you understand why now the Parliamentary Budget Officer, the budget watchdog, who's independent, says that there's only a 7.5% chance of those numbers actually being met. So the forecast that this Prime Minister has put forward only have a 7.5% chance of actually being the case. And so that doesn't give you a lot of confidence with this budget. What I have also been talking about for a little while now is there is a reworking of the presentation.
Yeah. So let's come back to the budget presentation, because I think that's I wanted to drill down on that point specifically. But can you just share a little bit more about what's going on with the Parliamentary Budget Officer? I think this is really important. So for some people will be less familiar with these mechanics, but you have the finance department that basically reports to the minister. But then it was under Stephen Harper that we created a Parliamentary Budget Officer as an important accountability mechanism. You have an independent officer of Parliament that looks at the numbers, comments on them publicly, and supports members of Parliament. You've had him at the Finance Committee, I think, a few times, and there's some question around his ability to do his job. So I guess if you could share just how have you found the Parliamentary Budget Officer's work? What's the nature of that office, and what's the kind of current controversy around his position?
Well, yeah, so the Parliamentary Budget Officer is someone who is nonpartisan. Right, they work for Canadians, and they are looking at the budget from a completely different lens. It's non-political. They are looking at it completely factual, and they're interpreting the numbers as such. Numbers that Finance Canada prepares.
Right.
And so when he says, "Well, this is shocking," the numbers actually come straight from the government.
Yeah.
And so he has been quite vocal about it. And of course, they are very careful with their words. And even the Auditor General does the same thing. And they have said that sometimes they just need to use, now they feel the need to use more colorful language because the government is just not listening.
Yeah.
But ultimately, they make recommendations, and it is up to the government to decide. Because the Parliamentary Budget Officer was very clear in his interpretation of the numbers, he is an interim Parliamentary Budget Officer right now. And so, of course, now that it's coming to the time to have a permanent Parliamentary Budget Officer, we see the headlines. Well, the government would like someone else.
Right.
Because, of course, if you think about it, they don't like being called out.
Yeah.
He is non-partisan. And so that is concerning, because if you think about it, they're choosing to fire the referee rather than play by the rules.
Yeah.
So that is concerning, because there has to be accountability, and there has to be someone who's looking at it completely differently, that Canadians can trust in their judgment. But they're trying to have someone else there. Right
So
now.
you've got an independent officer of Parliament raising these concerns, now potentially whose position is at risk. We've been highlighting the problem with these numbers massive deficit. I think the biggest deficit in Canadian history outside of the COVID period. Really incredible from someone whose brand was supposed to be bringing responsibility back. But their counter argument is, well, these are unique circumstances, and these are, obviously there's some unforeseen issues that have emerged as a result of the dynamics with the United States. How would you respond to the argument that, well, this is meeting specific challenges, and therefore the deficits are proportionate to those challenges?
Yeah. And it is a good argument, but what I would say is it has to be measured. And one thing that we don't see too much in the news, of course, is what's happening behind the scenes, which is not okay. So there's a change in the presentation of the budget, which but to allow for so much spending and for the government to be able to appear as if they are being responsible, fiscally responsible, and reducing their spending, they are changing definitions. Okay, they are changing the definitions of certain expenses. So corporate tax breaks, subsidies are being considered an investment because, this is what they're saying. Well, we need to invest in Canada because of the circumstances where those are not investments. And in fact, there's about $94 billion that were reallocated as investments into the capital budget as investments, but they're not. Like security for FIFA. FIFA is coming to Canada next year. Security for FIFA is an investment. Well, no, that's not an investment. That's not going to be leading to any asset, to any capital formation. And so you've got, from my perspective, a manipulation of the numbers. You're changing the definitions that are going outside of international standards. The UK does not do it, even though they do have two separate budgets as well. The Singapore doesn't do it. The Canadian provinces don't do it. But this government is choosing to do that. So when you apply this to the business world, it is always difficult to change accounting practices, for an entity. It always is tricky. But in this case, you have it when there's a huge amount of overspending. You do have these economic pressures into the country. And you're doing it when it's completely outside of even international standards. So 94 billion is not a small number. Yes, you need to be aggressive to rebuild our economy. We spoke about the fundamentals that could be changed to boost the economy, to unleash business that doesn't require that much spending. But I think here it's being done irresponsibly, and it is being done in a way that puts us outside of international standards, which is a big signal, of course, to investors. And we see it already with Fitch ratings, credit ratings issuing a warning that our credit rating, the rating for the country is under pressure.
Yeah. So going back to the beginning of the conversation, you were talking about the importance of the Canadian brand, economic fundamentals. And the government's argument is, if we spend more, somehow that's going to be the right response to these challenges. And it sounds like what you're saying is that actually the response to these challenges we face in terms of the United States and other issues has to be to improve our fundamentals. And further increasing deficit spending actually works counter to that objective of showing investors that we're a good place to invest. That the government is failing to address the issues that would actually meet the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why we do still see investment leaving the country. Right? Despite all these big announcements, despite the budget, despite the Prime Minister standing up and trying to signal otherwise. Investors are pretty savvy people. They know exactly what it means on the ground. They don't go by headlines. And I think it's going to be very difficult unless we address those fundamentals.
Yeah. So let's dig more into the budget presentation issue, because I know you have really highlighted this as being of paramount importance, and it may be a bit obscure to to an audience that doesn't have your background in this, but I think it's important to explain. So I've been here for about 10 years, and I've seen how the word investment is used in a very casual way in political environments by people like me who haven't worked in the finance world before. So the idea of an investment is to give people the implication that a particular item of spending is generating returns in a sort of, sometimes it's a non-specific way, but you could make arguments for almost any kind of government spending as generating some kind of return.
Investment.
Yeah.
So the easiest way to think about it, based on your everyday life, is when you look at your household budget, you've got your expenses, you've got your grocery bills, you have your utilities, right? You've got your insurance. Those are expenses that you need to run your house. And then, of course, you have your mortgage payment, which is also money that's coming out of your bank account, but that is an investment because your mortgage payment is going towards you owning your house. That's your asset. Yeah. So when you're buying groceries, well, that doesn't lead to an asset. It doesn't lead to you owning anything. So what this government is doing is saying, well, the spending that you do on your groceries is actually the same as the spending that you do on your mortgage. Right. Well, that's the difference.
And you could see how like if you could quickly push some fluidity into those definitions and say, well, by investing in healthy food, I'm investing in my well-being for the future, so it's an investment for me being healthy. And if I get a new new workout clothes, I mean, that's an investment because it's going to make me healthier and it's going to allow me to do So I guess it seems to me that there's in the political context, there's been, like, especially under the Liberals, like a willingness to kind of broaden what qualifies as an investment.
Absolutely. And I just explained the difference.
Yeah.
I had the chance to question the finance minister on this, and it was a very simple, straightforward question. We are in a very difficult situation fiscally right now. Why is the government so focused on changing the presentation, changing the definitions in the background, and trying to manipulate the numbers to make them look better, rather than actually just reduce your spending?
Right. Well, politically, you see why they're doing it, right? It's because you can just justify anything by calling it an investment, even if it's... There's lots of important things to spend money on that are not investments, that are short-term expenses. But if you call anything an investment, then you justify being able to...
That's right. And that is what they're saying. It's a generational investment, but you know that it doesn't translate to that necessarily, right? When you look at the metrics and you follow the money, well, no, it's actually generational debt, right? Which is particularly important to the youth because we are going to be inheriting that credit card, right? Like, just because you put it in a different credit card, that doesn't mean that the debt doesn't exist. And so that will come due. We are already spending more money in interest than we are on transfers for healthcare. And if you take all the GST that we collect in this country, all of it, even if you take that entire bucket of money and allocated to paying the interest, it's still not enough to pay for the interest. And that is based on 2025. The interest, we know, is going to go up, and over the next 5 years is going to go up to $76 billion. This is money we could be using to actually apply it to healthcare, for instance. That's a big issue. But no, we are going to be paying interest because all that debt, $1.3 trillion, is not free. Yeah.
So to come back to this definition precisely, like in a person's private life, if they have a mortgage on a house, yes, they're paying debt on that, but they're also accumulating an asset in the process. That's why it's classified as an investment. Whereas if there's no asset and you're accumulating debt without any asset, then you're following through. And that's where we are.
That's exactly it. If you put your groceries on your credit card and you know that you're not going to be able to pay that bill, and you just have interest and interest and interest building up, well, it's not leading to an asset. The only thing you're collecting, you've consumed the groceries. The only thing you're doing is you're accumulating that interest payment. You're accruing more debt because, of course, the interest itself will become debt. And so you end up in a very scary situation, right? So it's that's what the government is doing.
Yeah. Now, in terms of this issue of separating out investment from day-to-day expenses, it seems to me there's two distinct issues. One is whether you should separate investment from day-to-day expenses in your budget, and the other is whether they're correctly classifying things as investments or not. So you've highlighted the issue of classification, and are there other governments around the world that do this distinction but do it differently? Like that they say, okay, we are going to separate them out, but we're going to be very proper and precise about what is and is not an investment.
Yes, so it is spelled out, like the UK, for instance, they have it separated, and there's actually a chart
Right, okay.
where what expenses are going where. What you'll notice when you grab that budget, and I challenge anybody to pull the budget, it's online, and try to understand it yourself. That budget, that document, it is impossibly vague, and it is so difficult to actually understand because they will put funky labels for something that is a subsidy, right? Investments for, and I can't remember what it was.
Right.
Anyway, so some fancy titles for what is actually an operating expense. The Parliamentary Budget Officer's office ventured into trying to understand what they're trying to say. And of course, they came up with the $94 billion. But not only that, it was the definitions are being changed and muddled so much that they have called for an independent expert body to police the numbers, because the government is playing this game of changing definitions and reallocating expenses. And it's so bad that they are saying, for Canadians to know what's going on, you actually need an independent expert body to be policing and reviewing those numbers regularly.
Right. So to bring these things together, on the one hand, they are playing with these definitions. On the other hand, there's this problem with the Independent Parliamentary Budget Officer continuing to be classified as interim. So they're changing the definitions, and it seems like they're trying to weaken the accountability structures that are supposed to go with that. Why not just adopt the British standard? I mean, what would be their argument for saying we're not going to take the existing distinctions used by peer jurisdictions?
I think it's not convenient to them.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Because right now, because they've created this. Changing the definitions while at the same time changing the presentation, it just makes it very confusing. Right? And you literally need to behave like a forensic accountant to be able to follow the numbers and understand what they are. Right? If they had changed the presentation, even though I think it's bad timing, right? You do that when you're stable.
Right.
You don't do that when the economy is at risk, is so unstable. But even if they had done that and just done it clearly, no changing of definitions, I think even that would have been a bit more palatable. The problem is they're doing at the worst possible timing, and they are also going in there and changing definitions of expenses. And now they're moving things back and forth that shouldn't be, and reallocating them in areas where they shouldn't be. That's the problem. That's where you lose that credibility.
So changing gears, let's talk about the Finance Committee and the work you're doing there on tax havens. So I think most people who follow this regularly will know members of Parliament are assigned to different committees, and the Finance Committee is where the Budget Implementation Act is studied. You do a lot of important work looking at the nation's finances. It's probably one of, if not the most high-profile committees. Right now, you're doing a study on tax havens in the midst of all these challenges with our nation's finances. We're having a lot of discussion about how some wealthy, well-connected individuals and corporations are able to, even if they're not doing a lot of work in that jurisdiction, headquarter themselves somewhere else to avoid paying Canadian taxes. And famously, Mark Carney, this was something he did when he was before he was Prime Minister. So can you just share a bit about that study, about the tax havens issue, about what you're proposing on that, and kind of how Mark Carney fits into that whole picture?
Yeah. To take a step back, so this structure of a tax havens, initially, it was intended so that corporations don't incur double taxation when they are operating in different jurisdictions. Unfortunately, now it is being used so aggressively for tax avoidance that it has created an environment where some corporations are paying no taxation, no taxes, right? There's no taxation for them. And that is where we have an issue, because we have seen it's a concentrated select group of companies. One of the biggest abusers, of course, or the biggest one that uses it aggressively is Brookfield. And it was, this was done, of course, when Carney, Mark Carney, Prime Minister Carney, was part of the corporation. He oversaw it. He oversaw the movement of the headquarters away from Canada, if you remember that. Yeah. It was under his advice that the headquarters of a Canadian company were moved to the U.S. And of course, but now in the context of tax havens, it is they are being they're avoiding paying taxes, and it is disproportionate, or I should say, it is a structure that you can't apply to everybody. So. When I question some of our witnesses, I explain that as Canadians, we pay taxes when we earn income, when we buy anything, when we own property, and even when you die, you pay taxes. But there's no way to avoid the taxman, unless you're wealthy or you're one of these big corporations. Why? Because you have the option of establishing these structures in tax havens. And you just shift your profits and you don't have to pay taxes. And they would say, well, everybody can establish those theoretically, but they're expensive to establish. You need expensive lawyers, expensive accountants. Is that going to be accessible to, an average Canadian? No, it's not going to be accessible. So in itself means that it is only the wealthy, extra wealthy, the big corporations like Brookfield that use it, and they are using it aggressively to avoid paying taxes. But for an average Canadian, well, we have to pay every single dollar of it, and that's I think that is a little bit cynical of the Prime Minister, right? Like, he knows this well. He's not answering questions. We've asked him questions during question period. He does not answer them. He gets uncomfortable. He's not standing up, and I think it's because he knows it's not going to be a good positive answer for him. Otherwise, he would get up and say it. Like, if there's no issues with it, then why not just simply answer the questions? So that's one of the studies that we're doing right now in finance. Yeah.
So that's, obviously it's an important issue of trust around the decisions he's made, and the use of tax havens, as well as moving their corporate headquarters to the U.S. But what do you think should be the policy responses? What are the things that the Government of Canada can do to try to address the fact that, as you say, wealthy and well-connected people have opportunities to avoid taxes that most Canadians don't?
I think that you have to make sure that everybody is paying their fair share of taxes, but that policies are not, when applied, they are not disproportionately disadvantaging others and providing an advantage for some, right? I think that's where people have an issue. When you think about it, when you're saying, well, we want our companies to be competitive and not to pay double taxation, well, yeah, we can agree on that.
Yeah.
But when that translates into, well, they're paying no taxes, right? And Canadians are paying their share of taxes and they're struggling, right? Then that becomes an issue, right?
Yeah.
So that's what we need to make sure as parliamentarians that we do these studies, right? Highlight some of the deficiencies in the policies that we currently have, and address them. Unfortunately, what we see right now in the study is the Liberals are quickly trying to just cover up for the Prime Minister, or cover up for Brookfield, and so you don't see an openness to actually addressing it. It is what it is. This is a reality. We have a problem. Let's work together to come up with a solution to address it. I don't see it.
Yeah, fascinating. So we will, in the notes for this, link to all your social media platforms, and I'm sure people will be interested to follow the work you're doing at Finance Committee, as well as some of these other issues we've talked about. The final area I want to just explore a bit is kind of coming from the banking world, supporting small businesses, coming into politics now. You talked about how this wasn't really a childhood dream of yours, but seeing the problems and seeing the need, you've come in this direction. What have you found now being in politics compared to your previous life? I think we're all in interesting ways shaped by our previous career background, right? And so you kind of have a set of expectations, like this is what a normal workplace is, or this is how you get things done, and then politics is for most people very, very different from what they did before. So how have you found being here? How have you found trying to translate your knowledge and experience to this new environment?
Yeah. So that's a funny question. It has been definitely very different. It's a much more hostile environment than you would have in the private sector, because in the private sector, every employee of the company is pushing for the same goal.
Right.
It doesn't always feel that way here, even though we're all working for Canadians, and you would think that we're all trying to achieve the same goal, right?
Yeah.
Like, make sure that Canadians have an opportunity, regardless of where they start in life. And so that I have found shocking. The length of meetings has always shocked me. I remember we would book an hour, and you better not go over that hour, right? And you're hoping to finish earlier. That doesn't seem to happen here. The other thing that I was confused about...
People in politics like to talk,
Yes. Whereas I came from an environment where I could get to the point and be very succinct. But also I just get confused about some of the...
Go on.
Some of the things that happen. Like, for instance, we had Bill C4 that we were studying in finance. This is a bill that the government put forward. And we go into the meeting, and then the government, so the Liberals, start to filibuster their own bill, which means we can't vote it, and it can't go anywhere. They're just wasting meeting time. And I was just going, what is going on? I thought you wanted this bill to go through. Why are you filibustering?
Yeah.
This whole filibustering world is completely new to me.
Yeah. Those are really interesting observations. Like, I think, like most people, when they go to work, they're doing work that everybody around them agrees is good work. If you're a teacher, if you're a banker, if you're a doctor, a nurse, whatever profession is, most of the time, like everybody agrees that you're making the world a little bit better through your work, right? Whereas politics is one of those rare environments where our work is defined by conflict. We are trying to achieve one objective. Now, in a macro sense, we're aiming at the same objective. We're aiming at the common good for the country, right? We're supposed to be. Hopefully that's true for most people, regardless of where they sit.
I find $1.3 trillion of debt not
No,
necessarily good.
No, I agree. So there are different conceptions of what is going to make our country better. So but in that macro sense, even if we both, politicians on all sides are concerned about the good of the country, That may not be true in the case of everyone, right? But also in practice we're conflicting because if the government is doing something we think is bad for the country, then a good day might just mean stopping them from getting that done. It might just mean standing in the breach and saying no, and that's some of the committee procedures we use to do that.
That said, the other thing that was interesting for me to watch is, of course, within the House of Commons, we are sitting on the one side, the government, the Liberals are sitting on the other. And during question period, there's a lot of back and forth, and usually it's kicked off by our leader, Pierre Poilievre, and the responses are coming from the Prime Minister, and they're going back and forth. And what shocked me is actually once they're done, they're chit-chatting and laughing. And so I thought, oh, wait a minute. I thought we were just really into this. So anyways, taking a step back and leaving all politics aside, that is nice to see.
Right.
Right, where you've got two leaders of their respective parties with different perspectives. But at the end of the day, they are obviously chit-chatting and laughing about it and having very thoughtful conversations between them. So anyways, that was a little bit surprising to me, but nice to see. Yeah.
Now, one thing you do often is I see you drawing on anecdotes from people you talk to in your riding. I would imagine that in your previous life, you're exposed to business owners and you're hearing about their struggles, their challenges. But you're exposed to an incredible breadth of people in the context. And I know you did a ton of door knocking in the election campaign and still doing it afterwards. So is one other difference just the number of stories you're exposed to, or did you find that's kind of the same as before?
No, most definitely, right? You open yourself up to all sorts of feedback and arguments and perspectives. And I did a lot of door knocking, as you mentioned, so about 100,000 doors, which means you go around the riding several times. You don't always get somebody at the doors, but as you door knock, you enter somebody's life momentarily, and so they're pouring their heart out to you. And I did feel sometimes helpless in terms of they are worried about what they're going to eat next day. There was this one lady who had just lost her job at Upper Canada Mall, because my riding is Newmarket Aurora. Upper Canada Mall is in Newmarket. She was working there. She lost her job. She had 3 boys, and she was crying at the door saying, I don't know what I'm going to feed my boys next week, Sandra. And just that helplessness of that I can't help, and the struggles that Canadians are facing in that moment, right? And or sometimes there's victims of crime, right? Where you just there are lives that you might not be able to repair, right? When you in Vaughan, where there was a father that was killed because he was protecting his family. He will never be back, right? He will not come back, and the impacts of that in the family, the children, and the communities, because it's a ripple effect, the community around it, it's long lasting. And sometimes to me it feels like just the government policies are not fast enough. They're not meeting that moment. And that was actually the theme of my maiden speech, where I was saying, where is the legislation to meet this moment? Where is the legislation to meet this moment? And those are some of the things that I still don't understand. We put, the jail not bail bill forward. It was voted down by the Liberals. They voted against it, and I just thought, why? Why? We had the chance to make the changes quickly, and then the response was, no, it's not good enough. Well, we'll come up with our own. Eventually, they did. But in the interim, lives are being impacted. This is why I also just didn't understand shutting down the government during the summer. We had been shut down since the prior year for the Christmas holidays. Then it was prorogation. Then it was the leadership race. Then it was the election. And then we come back and just, a few days later, we shut down for the summer. Why? Right? The criminals are rampant on our streets. We were supposed to get there and work. And where is the urgency? That's one thing that I don't understand, right? Because the cost is people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for coming on. I think we'll leave it there. I think you have another one of those meetings to get
I do.
get to. So
Yeah.
this has been really good, and I think we're so lucky to have you in Parliament, bringing the breadth of experience that you have, and it's. I think it's interesting for people to know that within Parliament, within our Conservative caucus specifically, we do have such breadth of experience, right? We have financial professionals, police officers, doctors, former political staffers even. We have people who have different kinds of life experience,
Yes.
as well as, you know, in their personal lives, they're drawing on different kinds of experiences as well. And then we're able to share information, and every position we take collectively, it draws from discussions we have, but especially from people that have a lot of expertise. So, so thanks for being here, and thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.